Welcome, Mirsada. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Sally.
So, a lot of people are moving abroad, whether it's for a short period of time, long period of time, the unknown amount of time for some, and more are including families. And on the summit, we've had a few speakers that, are sharing their experience with their kids, and that's great because everybody's experience is a little bit different from their personal experience, but you help people with moving abroad with kids. Like you know more of that deep kind of emotional things that generally are some things that we really should be aware of or consider when we're moving abroad.
Yeah, I work with international families, English-speaking international families who, yeah, that are looking to be more emotionally intelligent, and they're in the middle of a transition. And transitions are challenging. They can be really challenging for anybody. And really being thoughtful and in tune with how you feel, how your children feel, is a really important part of making that transition um, a good one. So that's really where I focus and helping people navigate those transitions. And those transitions look different for everybody. Everybody adjusts to them differently. I'm the mom of four, and we've lived on three different continents, and so I have my own experience moving, and each move is different, and each child reacts to the moves differently. And you might be more concerned about one kid than another kid, and then the next move it might be different, right? It's really interesting. I know that you moved with your daughter. So yeah, I know that you have your own experience with it. So, and did you find it challenging?
She found it challenging, and I think because with our initially we were going to move to the States and we were going to move to California, and so she was 13 at the time, and she was all excited that we're going to go to California. And after a couple of events that happened, I had changed my mind. And then we moved to Costa Rica instead.
Right.
And she was not happy about that. And I get it, being 13 for one, and thinking you're going to go to California and then you go to Costa Rica, two completely different countries.
Very
We
different.
went from, I don't know, Calgary was over 1 million people at the time to the town that we were in was maybe 20,000 people. We didn't know anybody at all. We didn't speak Spanish. The whole school system, like everything was different. So when we were there, she did okay. Like she made friends and things like that, but she would say, "Well, they're not my real friends. My real friends are in Calgary." And after she left Costa Rica, she had said, she's like, "That was the worst time of my life." She's older now. Looking back, I hope like we haven't brought it up to talk to her again about it, but when I've talked to some of her other friends and people, and I've said that she said that, they said, really? She talked so good about it. So maybe it was just that kind of initial, and now that, it's been many years and times changed. But yeah, everybody's different. Even I have a friend of mine, her kids, she's got a daughter, and her daughter's best friend moved to Abu Dhabi. And she was excited, I think probably around the same age, 13, 14-ish. And she was super excited. And my friend said to her mom, she's like, I am not ever moving anywhere. Don't you dare move. I will not go. Like, and so weird because they're best friends, completely different perspective of moving abroad.
For sure. And I think that, depending on the age of your kid, there's so many factors that play into how a child responds to a move abroad. And, there are just some really fundamental pieces that are really important when you're moving. And so I don't know if you have read or if you are aware of this book called Third Culture Kids. It's been touted in the international community for a long time, and it's been around since I think the 1980s, and they've done different iterations of it. But they have an acronym RAFT for the transition process, right? So R is reconciliation, and that is really kind of repairing any relationships that you have as you're leaving to a new place, because you don't want to feel as though you can't go back to that place, right? And so
Right.
That's a really important piece. And I don't often think, sometimes people think, oh, great, I'm just so happy to be out of here. I don't have to, deal with those people anymore. But it's a really important piece of the process. So yeah, I think that so R is raft, A is affirmation. And so that is just thanking the people that have been a part of your experience, and maybe coming up with like gifts for people and thank you notes, and you're just really acknowledging the people that have been in your life in that place. And then F is sorry, farewell, and so that's doing a farewell party. And again, it's another component of the affirmation, the thanking people for being part of your thing and saying goodbye. And it's also not just saying goodbye to people, but it's saying goodbye to your school, it's saying goodbye to your home, it's saying goodbye to people that have been in your life, being special places you've been. And I think that acknowledging those experiences and then saying goodbye is often an overlooked. I think we often think about people, but we don't often think about places and schools, and
Mm.
how when you move, the whole life of a child is turned upside down. The whole life, right? Everything. And so having them prepare for that process is really important. And so then the T is thinking ahead. So it's, thinking about what they want to bring with them to the next location, thinking about where they're going, thinking about the exciting things they're going to do. So that's a really important process. And so raft is like building a raft. It's these four pieces that you can put in place, and then you get on the raft and you leave. And they always say that if you say goodbye well, you can say hello well.
That's a good one. And it makes sense because even though we're saying goodbye, and that might not necessarily be a goodbye forever. And especially
No,
now with technology and things like that, it's quite easy to keep in touch. And I mean, I've been out of Canada since 2011. So a long time, but I have my core best friends in Canada. And of course, when I'm not around, we kind of keep in touch a little bit, few messages here and there, but not really too much. But as soon as I'm back in town, we just pick up. Of course, we'll spend hours talking because we've got, several months of stuff to catch up on. But we just catch up from basically where we've left off.
yeah, yeah, and I think that a lot of uh, international families have those relationships, right? They have those
Mm.
really intense moments where they're forming these really intense relationships, and then when they leave, it can be very sad. But then when they see each other again, they pick up. When I first moved to Switzerland in 2012, I met a woman actually at the airport. We met in baggage claim. I had one child and I was pregnant with our second, and she had two. And we like exchanged numbers in baggage claim, and we got together at the park, and we became super good friends. We saw each other for lunch a couple of days a week. But then over the time, our relationship evolved as our kids got a little bit older and they went to school and we had different commitments, but we always had this thing where we kept in touch. And when she left, it was like I was losing my security blanket. It was really, really challenging. But we I still see her. She lives in the States now. And so when I'm back in the States, I usually try to go and see her. And it's so nice. We just really pick up exactly where we left off. And that's a really beautiful piece of this international life. The relationships that you form with people are very deep and very connected.
Right. And I think though also it makes kids resilient in a way because they have challenges that can be different than us as an adult. Like, we're the ones that make the decision and kind of choose to go, where a lot of times they don't really have much of a choice.
Right.
And it is changing everything for them. But then um Ali Mona was on earlier, and what she was saying too with her kids, when there's a new kid at school, her kids are one of the first kids to go over and say hi and make friends because they know what it's like to be the new kid because
Right.
they've done it a few times. And she was struggling too with a move. when they had to leave China. And she said it was amazing that one of her daughters just said, "It's okay, mommy. We've been through worse. We've done tougher things."
Yeah.
And it does build up this bit of resilience and dealing with emotion and kind of problem solving that without these experiences, some kids just don't build up those things, or they do differently.
They do. I mean, yes, of course. And I think that there are just so many wonderful aspects of the international life. And I don't ever like to overlook those wonderful things. But there are challenges. And I think that really being thoughtful about how your child is emotionally feeling in these different, and realizing that there's a lot of grief associated with the international life, right? Saying goodbye. Even when you go home for the summer, if you go home for the summer and come back, right? You're saying hello, you're saying goodbye to your friends, you're missing them for the summer, you're going, you're seeing your family, it's really great. But then at the end of the summer, you have to say goodbye again. So there's a lot of loss. And it's really important to be paying attention to that and being thoughtful about it, and helping your child process those components of the international life. And that's one of the things that I help parents with, because also it can be very challenging for parents. Like the emotions that we feel, our children are so susceptible to
Mm.
feeling those things. And so really feeling like we have the support and we have the guidance to be able to navigate these what can be challenging waters, with some stability, is so important.
So what would you say would be, I don't really want to call them red flags, but some things to look for in your kids to kind of see how they're doing, because they may not say, or because they may not really know. And so how is a parent, what are some of those things that I might be looking for, so I know that maybe I need to have a conversation or make them feel like it's safe to talk?
Sure. And I think I will come to your question. And I think that it just
Mm.
highlights for me the thing that's one of the things that's most important. And it's not even just for international kids, but it's especially important for international kids. And it's building an emotional vocabulary, right? It's giving kids words um, that they can use and they can express how they're feeling. And sometimes it can be scary as parents to, we don't want to put thoughts in our kids' head, but our kids are feeling these things, right? And really kind of sharing those things with them, and kind of prodding and learning is a really important piece of helping them navigate these waters. So giving them that emotional vocabulary. I think that when kids are avoiding, like saying goodbye, they don't want to, they don't want to do things. They don't. I think that's a really important thing to really kind of dig into. I think that as parents, it's when we're in transition, there's so much that's going on. There's so much that's going on. And so it can be really easy. And when I say easy, I don't mean that it's even thoughtful. Like there's no thought put into it. It's just that we're just trying to get through the motions, and we miss some of these things. And so we just say, "Oh, there's nothing going on and everything's fine." And then sometimes we have those where like a child is crying continuously, they don't want to separate from their parent. There's some very big red flags where getting professional help is really important. But I think the more that we can continue to have dialogue and open up and share even some of our experiences, the way that we're feeling, some of the things that we're excited about, some of the things that are hard for us, I think is really, really important.
Definitely. And so I guess when should we start having, I mean, we should always have these types of conversations about how they're feeling, but when we're going to move abroad, do we start when we're thinking about it, but maybe we're not sure, or we've made the decision and we know, and then to start talking like this is what's going to happen? Because my kind of thought is, we don't want to really open that door to all of these things if then all of a sudden we decide that we're not going, and we bring on some stresses to the child potentially unnecessarily.
Yeah, I think, listen, I think that it's different for everybody. I don't think that there's any cookie cutter response to that question. I think that it's knowing your child and knowing how they react to change and how we think that we know our children best, right? There's nobody that knows them better than we do. And so really being thoughtful and just thinking about how they're gonna deal with that. I also think that how old they are, the age that they are, right? Like a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, I don't think that they need to know until the decision's been made. I think that with a teenager, maybe having that conversation with them ahead of time is important, right? It's important to let them know that this is what we're thinking to help prepare them. But also I think it's important to communicate that as the parents, we're making the final decision, right? That
Right.
we care about how they feel about this, but that at the end of the day, we're going to be making the decision. And so I don't think that there's a right answer for that,
Right.
for that, for that process.
Yeah, I mean, when we're dealing with people, there is
Yes.
no 100% black and white. Same with moving abroad. There is no 100% everything is. Everybody's experience is different. It depends on our personalities, our emotions, our
And there's so
everything
many
with
things
that.
that can impact the way that we experience move abroad. We moved actually from Switzerland to Indonesia, and 6 months afterwards, we entered COVID, and so that experience for us was really different, than
Mhm.
um, than our initial move to Switzerland. And when we initially moved to Switzerland, we had one young child, and I was pregnant with our second. When we moved to Indonesia, we had 4 kids. Again, it's, all these moves are different and we react differently. We're in different places. We think differently. I would say I do think that the first move is, I think it's the hardest. I think it's the,
Absolutely.
you know, I
I I
they're
agree.
all hard, but I do really think that we just don't even know what we're getting into, and so that makes it more complicated. Which is why I think that getting support, from people who have done it is really beneficial.
Right. And yeah, I mean, the first time is just because we just don't know. We can read stuff and we can expect certain things to happen or not to happen, but it's not the same. It's like travel, you can read a book on Italy and standing in front of the Colosseum, but until you're literally standing in front of it, you're the smells, the sounds, the emotions, the everything. The first time is always the hardest. Um, and then just generally, at least for ourselves, for me personally, I've moved several times now, but I now know what to expect. It's still hard. There's still challenges, but it's the more often I do it, like this last time, when I moved to Montenegro and got a place there, and I was there for just a few weeks, maybe a couple months at most, and I just thought, oh my gosh, did I make a mistake? I don't know anybody here. I don't know the language, and I'm by myself, and it's the same for me all each time. And then I just thought, no, this is part of the process. Part of the process is the questioning. Did I make a mistake? Part of the process is feeling lonely because people can be surrounded by their friends and family in their home cities and still feel lonely. And
Sure.
part of the process. And so then I knew to take a step back from myself and just say, no, this is part of the process because I've done it so many times. But definitely that first time I would say is the hardest. However, that's only if the second and third and fourth, your circumstance hasn't changed. So if the first time you're by yourself, that's one thing. If the second time you have kids, that's a whole other
Yes.
challenges that's
No,
going to be hard
exactly.
too.
Exactly. And I think that there are a lot of, my husband works with the UN. And so there are lots of people who enter this life of travel before they have kids and, picking up and moving and packing a suitcase and, moving with just some boxes to a new place isn't that hard. And my husband said, the first move that we made with our family was the hardest move. And it's because you're dealing with so many other people's emotions, right? You're
Right.
having to navigate those emotions. And if you're not in tune, it makes it really complicated. And it can be really easy to dismiss or ignore some of the challenges. But grief is grief, whether it's the loss of a parent or the loss of a friend that you're moving, or the loss of your school. There are a lot of hidden losses actually with moving internationally. And it's really paying attention to some of those hidden losses. We moved from Indonesia last summer, and one of my children was, she's very social. She had lots of friends. She was really well known. And then moving to a new school, she was nobody. Right.
Mm.
And that was a big
Yeah,
loss. And it wasn't a loss that like somebody would necessarily think about, right?
right.
It's a real hidden loss. And so there are some of those hidden losses that, paying attention and really thinking about how these are going to impact your kid and slowing down to have enough time. We live in such a frenetic world where we're just busy all the time, gotta go, gotta do, and we gotta push, push, push. The movers are coming. That we sometimes don't take the time that we need to really slow down. And that's where I think actually the golden nuggets are, is in those moments of slowing down.
Hmm. I think so too. And then it gives time to adjust and to process, especially for kids, because they don't think like we do. Right? They don't have the skills to think. And as you said, for us as parents, we might think, okay, yeah, our kid's very social. They'll make no new friends, no problem. It's not a big deal. They made lots of friends when we moved there. She'll make lots of friends in the new place. And that is probably a truth and a belief. But for her, if we look at people who go from, I'll do it, from somebody who's famous to all of a sudden they're not, as an adult, like we can almost relate a little bit more to that, but that would be very similar for her. She was very popular, everything, and
Right.
then to not, where we just thinking, oh, she'll be fine. She's popular. She'll make lots of new
And
friends.
like, what did you
That's a
expect,
huge
right?
change.
Right. And kind of like,
Yeah.
what do you expect? Like, of course, you're going to a new place, nobody's going to know you, right? But
Yeah.
we don't necessarily think of that in those terms, right? So I think it is
Right.
really important to really consider some of these more nuanced aspects of moving with kids.
So definitely, obviously, the friendships and new school is a big thing. And I would assume if they're into whatever sports activities, making sure that wherever we're moving to has at least some of those things, and to try some new things, of course, but to keep those things available that they like. And that could mean perhaps a longer commute for us from a different area, or
No,
something, just to like a bit of a give and take.
right. No, like when we moved to Indonesia, we were in Jakarta, and it was like, do we live close to the office or do we live close to the school? Because the traffic is just, I mean, it's just well known that it's a very busy city. So it was like we had to make a decision, right? And with 4 kids, we chose to live close to the school. So,
Right.
right. And then my husband had to do the commute. And so, but those are some of the things to consider and to weigh, and yeah, and just to really be thoughtful about.
Definitely. So, what would you say to people? It's kind of like a final thought with kids. Are there certain key things that you've found that have made it easier for your kids with moving, that may help them?
Yeah, I think that I do think that the like doing a farewell party is
Hmm.
really important. I was really surprised actually when we were in Indonesia. A family had been there and they just picked up and moved middle of the school year, and like it was almost like they were there today and gone tomorrow. And they had 2 kids in school, and one of my friends, they were very close with their child was very close with one of the kids, and it was very difficult for those people who stay. That's the thing, is that we don't. It's not always considered. Sometimes even as internationals, we stay and people leave. Like as I was saying with my friend, right? And really paying attention to that is so having that closure and going through that RAF process, I think is the most beneficial thing. I also think it's really important as parents to remember that our kids are developing their identity. And that is a critical piece that I think sometimes gets overlooked in this process. As adults, we have our identity. We know if I grew up in the States, even though my parents were European, I grew up in the States, I very identify as an American. Kids that are moving, they struggle with that. They struggle with figuring out who they are, where they belong. And that's just a natural process of childhood. And then add the complexity of international life. So I think that paying attention to those two pieces are really probably the most critical thing. And helping kids with the vocabulary, for their emotions and the way that they feel. So I guess of those three things, the RAF process, realizing our kids are developing individuals and helping them in really figuring out who they are and where they belong, and then also in helping them develop an emotional vocabulary, which I think is critical for everybody anywhere, but it's even more critical for international kids.
Absolutely, I agree, and especially because us as adults, sometimes, we if we have to think, "How do I describe how I'm feeling?" When we're adults and we have a bunch of words and vocabulary and know, but for a child, especially the younger ones, to try to describe how they're feeling or what they're going through is extremely challenging for them.
Yeah, and I think that also being really honest with ourselves about, we as humans, we have very complex emotional landscapes, more complex than I think most people like to admit. And so
Right.
really putting a finger on our own emotional landscape is really important, is a really important piece for parents, right? In helping their
Mm.
children. If we can be really honest with the way that we feel, even if we're excited, there's still loss for us, right? And we still have to go through our own grief process. And so understanding our loss and then helping our kids, and it can be really easy to um, I don't want to say sweep it under the carpet, but to kind of be like, oh, look at all the amazing things that we're gonna, right? In order to try to help our children adjust, we want to just pretend that some of those harder aspects aren't there. And I really think long term, that's actually quite detrimental. Um, so it's really important to pay attention to those pieces.
Right, and to know that you're gonna miss your favorite cafe or place that you would go for lunch with your kids if you did a when my daughter was younger, we had date night, and we would go to a certain restaurant, and it was just the 2 of us, and we were there for I mean, this is over 20 years ago, and we would be there for 2 hours, and people are like, "Nobody's in a restaurant that long," and I said, "Well, we are." And we just hang out and she would color and we had that and then, moving, obviously we didn't have that place for date night anymore, but then we would find something new and for the last time to go in and have that, okay, well this is our last date night here.
Right.
We're gonna start something new elsewhere, and have that, and as you said at the beginning, it's not just people, but it's also places too, your favorite ice cream shop or whatever it is that they love to do or the things that, you did together as a family at certain places.
Yeah, and I think that technology has added so many benefits to our life, and as international families, it's added so many pieces, and really using that technology in really helpful ways, I think is a really important thing, and setting up ways for them to connect over FaceTime or WhatsApp groups or different ways, I think is really it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. Just because we're gone doesn't mean we won't be back.
Right.
And for kids, like who knows where they're going to end up in school or reconnect in another country with kids from the first country or second country. We just never know. So keeping in touch is always great.
No, exactly. I think that's a really important thing, and yeah, just building, and even if it's planning a trip back to see some friends,
Mm,
or even if it doesn't work out, having that plan can just add a layer of security for children that can be really helpful.
absolutely. That's
Yeah,
great. Well, thank you, Rasada, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know everybody that's watching got some valuable information and some good tips to think about for dealing with their kids for their upcoming move abroad.
yeah. Well, I wish everybody the best of luck as they transition into a new life.